This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy: How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com.
Robert Spencer here to talk about Islamophobia. We hear a lot about Islamophobia these days. The Biden regime has promised a program to stop Islamophobia. This is being spearheaded by the second gentleman, that is Doug Emhoff, the husband of Kamala Harris, who may well be our next president. And there are many mentions of Islamophobia from other authorities around the country, particularly since October 7th, 2023, when Hamas massacred 1,200 Israelis. Since then, of course, we have seen demonstrations all over the Western world in favor of Hamas and the jihad against Israel. And many of these have been on college campuses all around the United States, whereupon university administrators have almost invariably declared their determination to fight anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Now, in the first place, that's curious because we see the anti-Semitism all over the place, but we don't see the Islamophobia. In other words, we see Jews and supporters of Israel being attacked on campuses, or menaced, or verbally abused, or all of the above. We do not see Muslim students being subjected to the same kind of treatment, nor, of course, should we see such a thing. But nonetheless, these university administrators, almost invariably, when they speak about stamping out anti-Semitism, they include a necessity, supposedly, to stamp out also Islamophobia. And so this brings us in the first place to the question, what exactly is Islamophobia? What exactly is the Biden regime talking about working to eradicate? What exactly do the university administrators mean when they say that they're going to fight Islamophobia? And that is where this all becomes very dicey, because one of the strange aspects of the whole Islamophobia problem is that it is only very rarely that you find anyone defining what Islamophobia is. The British government of Prime Minister Keir Starmer is a healthy exception to that rule, in that they have recently offered a definition of Islamophobia that they intend to criminalize. And it apparently includes actions against Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Now, this, in a nutshell, encapsulates the whole problem with the Islamophobia enterprise. And that is this: vigilante attacks against innocent Muslims are never justified, never justifiable, and should indeed be prosecuted. Nobody argues with that. And if that's what you mean by Islamophobia, then great. But when the Keir Starmer government talks about Muslimness and perceived Muslimness, they're going way beyond the possibility of vigilante attacks against innocent Muslims. They're talking about working against those who speak honestly about the nature and magnitude of the Islamic jihad threat. If, in other words, you say, well, you know, there are various teachings of Muhammad, as I detail actually in my new book, Muhammad, A Critical Biography, that jihad terrorists use to justify violence and to make recruits among peaceful Muslims. If I said that in Britain, then I would be prosecuted, or could be prosecuted, if this enterprise if this enterprise to criminalize Islamophobia is successful, then I could be prosecuted for criticizing perceived Muslimness. In other words, relating the terror attacks to Islam would be a criminal offense, even though the terrorists themselves quite frequently relate terror attacks to Islam. And so what we have is a sleight of hand. It's a trick by criminalizing or appearing to criminalize the vigilante attacks against innocent Muslims, which are actually already criminalized, because to attack someone at random, to verbally abuse someone even, these things already can run you afoul of the law. And so it's unclear as to why you would need another law to deal with it when it comes to Muslims. But in any case, okay, that's fine. But once that law comes into effect, then you're going to have people who simply speak in a critical way about aspects of Islam being prosecuted for doing so. Not only that, but the whole equation of anti-Semitism with Islamophobia is illegitimate. Anti-Semitism has a very long record. Anti-Semitism goes back to before Christianity. And you have some pagan Greek writers talking about the Jews in a disparaging and negative fashion and retailing false stories about their practices. And then you have Christian anti-Semitism, you have Islamic anti-Semitism, you have the anti-Semitism coming from the left, which is very sparsely recognized. Karl Marx himself equated the Jews with capitalism and spoke about how the very existence of Judaism had to be eradicated in order to war against capitalism. And of course, you have National Socialism and on and on and on. And on the other side, what do you have? You don't have any long history of discrimination against Muslims. And even today, when there's so much hysteria about Islamophobia, you don't have discrimination on a large scale against Muslims, or hatred, or even these vigilante attacks against Muslims. For example, the FBI quite recently published its hate crime statistics for the past year. Now, they break it all down according to the alleged victim of the hate crime. Now, the whole thing is kind of a dicey, questionable exercise, because there's no definition of what constitutes a hate crime. You know, if somebody comes into my office and beats me up, well, that would likely be a crime. If somebody comes into my office and beats me up while uttering racial slurs, then is that a different level of crime? Apparently it is. So the FBI has these hate crime statistics, and they break it down. Number one victim of hate crimes in the past year in the United States, guess. It was, of course, Jews. And the anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish hate crimes were at the top of the list. There were 1,071 hate attacks, according to the FBI, against Jews in the past year. And then you go way down, group after group after group, and it's not until 8th place that you see anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic hate crimes. And there were fewer than 200 of those. So there were more than, actually more than 7 times, there were actually over 7 times more attacks on Jews than there were attacks on Muslims. Now, no attacks on either are ever justified. And there were plenty of other groups that were also attacked, and none of those attacks are ever justified either. But the point is that to single out Islamophobia, and not to mention any of the others, who the other groups who are attacked on a far more frequent basis than Muslims are, and to equate that Islamophobia with anti-Semitism, it's not borne out by the facts. It's not borne out by the FBI's own statistics. And I can remind you that we're talking about the Obama-Biden FBI. This is a deeply corrupt institution that has no interest whatsoever in minimizing attacks against Muslims. As a matter of fact, given its current orientation, it would want to maximize the number of attacks against Muslims in order to justify the regime's attempts to criminalize Islamophobia. And yet, even by those statistics, you have a minuscule number of attacks on Muslims compared to attacks on Jews and others. And so Islamophobia, in the final analysis, is a completely spurious concept. Certainly any attack on an innocent person, Muslim or non-Muslim, is to be absolutely opposed and rejected. Absolutely. At the same time, when you talk about this in terms of some kind of a phobia, some kind of irrational fear or hatred of Muslims, what you're really trying to do is stigmatize and demonize any honest analysis of the motivating ideology behind jihad terror attacks, and ultimately to silence that analysis, which would have the effect of allowing the terror attacks to advance unopposed and unimpeded. So when you next hear of somebody in the Biden regime or somebody in the academic establishment talk about the need to eradicate anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, then you should bear in mind that this is all part of the larger propaganda efforts to normalize this spurious concept and then use it as a cudgel in order to chip away even further at our First Amendment rights to the freedom of speech. Thank you. I'm Robert Spencer.